EZGTR.
Hey everybody, welcome to lesson 7 of learning to play Pachelbel's Canon in D major. As always, we got a great lesson for you. Today we'll be studying section I of the ebook. That's bars 35 to bars 38. If you haven't downloaded the ebook yet, go to EZGTR.com, sign up for the newsletter, and we'll send you a link to download the ebook, a backing MP3, and all kinds of other cool stuff. Now section I has got to be one of the more trickier runs here, so we'll break it down step by step. Okay, before we get started, let's get in tune. I'll play you an A at 440. Bar 35, section I. Now before we get started here, we need to go back to what we did on our last lesson, which was lesson 6, just as a brief reminder. Because if you look at the very first note of bar 35, we have a D note which is disconnected from the rest of the phrases which move us forward. So what we need to do is just go back to measure 34 and look at the last little idea, that little thing we have here with the octaves of C sharp. And then the first note of measure 35 is the D note. So that would tie together like this. The last measure of 34 to the first note of measure 35. So with that in mind, now we're actually able to move forward. Now the first little idea, or phrasing if you will, of measure 35 will start us on the 12th fret of the D string. And what we have here is a little grouping. We have several of them going through this motif of 16th notes. We have hammer-on pull-offs and little slides. So let's take a look at the first one here. We've got the D note hammering onto the E note to the F sharp on the D string, which looks like this. You could actually do that all with one downstroke. Then we come back to the D note. So that's essentially all on one string, on the D string. One more time. Okay, you guys, before we move on, I have to explain something to you really quick because this actually keeps reoccurring time and time again throughout today's lesson, and I have to make sure you understand it before we move on. So what I've done is I've made a couple modifications here to the score. I'm going to put it in front of the camera and see if I can explain this to you really simply. I know it might be a little confusing, and if you have any questions you can email me. So as you can see, we're right here at section I, bar 35. Now if you look at the music very carefully, we have 4 separate groupings. Now with the red marker, what I've done is I've circled the way the phrase is supposed to be played. And if you even look more carefully, you can notice with the yellow highlighter, which represents the first note of each grouping, that first note of each grouping actually represents the last note of each phrase. Meaning each phrase doesn't finish until we play that first note of the next grouping. Now once again, if that doesn't make sense, you can email me. And let me explain this to you musically. So if we look at our first idea, we went and talked about just playing these first few notes on the D string. Now that little idea won't actually finish until we play the first note of the next grouping, which is the C sharp on the A string. So that would sound like this. One more time. Okay, so our first grouping will sound like this. Now our second grouping moves up to the C sharp note up here on the B string, 14th fret. C sharp, D, E, C sharp, And then that little idea won't finish until we play the first note of the third grouping, which is a B note on the 16th fret of the G string. So it sounds like this. One more time. Okay, for grouping 3, now we're going to move up to the A string, 14th fret. We're going to play the B note. Then we're going to play the C sharp with the D, all with one downstroke, and we can do it as hammer-ons. One more time. Then we just come back down to the B. Then we just move up a whole step to the 16th fret and play the C sharp. Now remember, that C sharp note, if you look carefully at the score, is the first note of the fourth grouping. And remember that first note of the fourth grouping actually represents the last note of the third phrase which we're playing. So as a review, it'll sound like this. One more time. Now moving into phrase 4, we're just going to move up to the G string. We're going to play the A note on the 14th fret and do a quick pull off to the 12th fret G note. Then we're going to move up to the D string. We're going to play the F sharp note. And we're going to play the E note on the 14th fret and slide down to the 12th fret on the D note. And once again, that D note, if you look very carefully, is the first note of measure 36, which also represents the first note of the first grouping. Alright, let's do a quick review of bar 35. And to make it more musical, let's take the last grouping of bar 34 as a lead-in. Okay, here we go.